Okay, so the first thing to understand, pull your Bible out and turn to Genesis 2. It's right there in the beginning. Okay. We're going to discuss the 7 covenants that the Father has made or will make with man. A covenant is an agreement between two parties. It's a contract. What is he going to do for us? And what are we going to do for him? What are the terms of the contract? Blessings and curses. Obedience brings blessing. Disobedience brings curses. And I will show you with your own Bible, even the covenant of the Messiah, even in the book of Hebrews, we can find blessings and curses. But we're ahead of ourselves. There are 7 covenants. The Adamic covenant with Adam, the Noahic covenant with Noah, the Abrahamic covenant with Abraham, the Mosaic Covenant with Moses or Moshe, the Davidic Covenant with David, the Messianic Covenant, the prophecy of the Messiah, and then the covenant of peace, the establishment of the kingdom of God. This is a prophesied covenant that has not yet happened. So we're going to start with the covenant with Adam in Genesis chapter 2. Understand that these contracts, these covenants, these agreements between the Father and his people, us, because if you are a believer, you are grafted onto the tree of life, Israel. You are part of Israel. If you believe in the Messiah, you are part of Israel. Which means when he says, "Hear, O Israel," he's talking to you. And he's talking to me. My belief is we don't get to claim the blessings of the Messiah if we are not part of Israel. And we're told, in fact, we're grafted into the tree of life as the wild branch grafted in. But being part of that tree comes with, there's ramifications. There's things that we are to do. And so let's just get into it. The Adamic Covenant. Genesis 2 and 3 establish the blessings. Genesis 4 establishes the curses. Okay? And what we see here in Genesis is that the Father creates Adam. Okay? And then he makes Adam a helpmeet, his wife. Okay? So to be his helpmeet, to help him out, right? Man, it's not good that man should be alone. And as part of creating Adam, right, he puts him in a garden and he just starts to give him dominion over things. And so we see here, after they eat from the tree of life, right, the Father says, I commanded that you should not eat, 3:11. And the man said, the woman who you gave with me, she gave of the tree and I ate. Take responsibility, men. And Yahweh, Elohim, said to the woman, what is this you have done? And the woman said, the Nahash deceived me, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. And because you have done this, you are cursed more than all the livestock. Here's the curse for the transgression of the covenant. Cursed more of the livestock and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you are to go, eat dust all the days of your life. And I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. And to the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. Bring forth children in pain. And your desire is for your husband, and he does rule over you. Okay, so we're seeing here the relationship that's being established here. These covenants between Adam and Eve and the Father. Adam and Hava. Prior to this, we have Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said, "Be fruitful and increase." This is in Genesis 1:28. "Fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and the birds in the heavens and all creeping creatures. See, I have given you every plant that yields seed which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. It is for you food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to every creeping creature of earth in which there is a living being, every green plant is for food." This did not go away. This did not cease to be. A, because the covenant was not kept, or B, because new covenants were made. These rules still exist. Women still have pain in childbirth. It's still there. The snake still goes forth on his belly. The creatures of the earth still eat green things. Okay, these things still exist. They were not replaced by the Noahic covenant that comes next. And we're going to cruise here. We have to cruise here because there's a lot of scripture that we're going to hit. So just bear with me, okay? Genesis 9:9, the Noahic covenant. So flip to Genesis 9:9. Okay, we just start at 9. "And Elohim blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and increase and fill the earth." That was a portion of the covenant between Adam. And yet here it is again with Noah. Go to 9:9. Well, we'll go to 9:8. "And Elohim spoke to Noah and his sons with him, saying," 9, "And I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you." That's you. "And with every living being that is with you, of the birds, of the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that go out of the ark, every beast on earth. And I shall establish my covenant with you, and never again is all flesh cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again is there a flood to destroy the earth. And Elohim said, This is a sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living being that is with you for all generations to come. And every living being that is with you for all generations to come. I shall set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And it shall be when I bring a cloud over earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud, and I shall remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living being of all flesh, and never again let the waters become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I shall see it, to remember the everlasting covenant between Elohim and every living being of all flesh that is on the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. The Noahic covenant. Understand that all flesh other than Noah and his offspring and the animals that were chosen for the ark had been corrupted by this time, which is why the earth was flooded. Corrupted by who? Read Genesis. The Watchers, the Nephilim, inbreeding. It's all right there. You just have to read it. So the Father said, Noah, build an ark. I'm going to preserve you as a remnant, which the Father is in the business of preserving remnants that he has a covenant with. Things to think about. So, we have the Noahic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant. Let's go to Genesis 12. Just a couple pages, flip over. Genesis 12, 1-3. And Yahweh said to Abraham, Go yourselves out of your land, from your relatives and from your father's house, to a land which I show you. And I shall make you a great nation, and bless you, and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I shall bless those who bless you, and curse him who curses you, and in you all the clans of the earth shall be blessed. Okay. Go to Genesis 17:9. And I don't generally read the Bible this way. I don't do a lot of flipping. I read it in a linear fashion. But the verses that we are going to hit covering these 7 covenants literally go from Genesis 2 to Revelation 20. That's almost the entirety of the book. We don't have that much time to sit here and me to read it all to you so that we can cover these topics. So we necessarily have to flip. But I would encourage you to literally sit down and start reading at Genesis. And if you would like to do that, there's a playlist here on this channel called Shabbat where we do that. And you can find Genesis 1 and read along. So, Genesis 17:9. And Elohim said to Abraham, as for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you guard between me and you, and your seed after you. Every male child among you is to be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall become a sign of the covenant between me and you. And a son of 8 days is circumcised by you, every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house or bought with silver from any foreigner who is not of your seed. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your silver has to be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And an uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. And Elohim said to Abraham, as for Sarai your wife, do not call her name Sarai, for her name is Sarah. And I shall bless her, and also give you a son by her, and I shall bless her, and she shall become nations. Sovereigns of people are to be from her. So there you have a covenant and a prophecy. I'm sure you've heard of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, you don't get Jacob without Isaac, and you don't get Isaac without Abraham being found righteous in the eyes of Yahweh, of God, and he's found righteous in the eyes of the Lord after he is blessed by Melchizedek, who gives him the Torah. Chronologically speaking, it's right there in Genesis. You just read it. It's right there. The Abrahamic Covenant. Let's go to the Mosaic Covenant. Next chapter, Exodus 20. And hold on, we're going to get to the New Testament as well, okay? So just please bear with me. Exodus 20. Come on, page. You may be familiar with this passage, although most of you, truthfully, probably don't know where in the Bible it is. Exodus 20, Elohim spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or which is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under you. You do not bow down to them or serve them, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am a jealous God, visiting the crookedness of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving commitment to thousands, to those who love me and guard my commands. You do not bring the name of Yahweh your Elohim to naught, for Yahweh does not leave the one unpunished who brings his name to naught. Remember the Sabbath day and set it apart. 6 days you labor, and you shall do all your work. But on the seventh day is a Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. You do not do any work. For in 6 days the heavens were made. Respect your father and mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Do not covet. Sound familiar? Okay. 22. And Yahweh said to Moshe, say this to the children of Israel, you yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from the heavens. You do not make besides me mighty ones of silver, and you do not make mighty ones of gold for yourself. Moshe said to the people, do not fear, for Elohim has come to prove you, and in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. Okay, let's go to Exodus 24. Actually, we'll go to 23, 25 through 27. 23, 25 through 27. And you shall serve Yahweh, your Elohim, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I shall remove sickness from your midst. None shall miscarry or be barren in your land. I shall fill the number of your days. I shall send my fear before you and cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and make all your enemies turn their backs on you. More description of what you get for being obedient 24/7. And he, Moshe, took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that Yahweh has spoken we shall do and obey. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, see the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you concerning all these words. Now, covenants are generally speaking sealed in blood. The Hebrew word for covenant is brit, which means to cut, which means that there is blood, a blood sacrifice to seal the deal. It's part of why, it's not part of, it's the reason why you have an issue with Hebrews 8:8, because Hebrews was written by a Greek, in Greek, using Greek translation, and they translated that word brit, cut, to mean testament. Like your last will and testament, after you die, these things will come into effect, which is why you end up with the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's why there's this concept of the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the actual Hebrew words that were used in the book of Hebrew, and especially the reference to Jeremiah 31:31 through 33, it's not talking about a testament, it's talking about a blood deal, okay? And there is no new covenant, there is a renewed covenant, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. But understand that there is blood, and a covenant was established through the blood of the Messiah, as it was prophesied to be in the Old Testament. You cannot have a Messiah in the New Testament without the Old Testament, because the New Testament is the Old Testament made flesh. So, I think we've established here the Mosaic Covenant. Moses had the book of the covenant, which we're reading. Okay, the Davidic Covenant, 2 Samuel 7. I'm going to have to look up what page that's on. 2 Samuel 7. Where did you go? Page 316 in my book. I know, right? There's books in this Bible that some people never even heard of. Didn't even know they were in there. And that's okay. You just got to read it for yourself. 2 Samuel 7. Go to chapter 7. And it came to be, when the sovereign was dwelling in his house, and Yahweh had given him rest from all the enemies around, that the sovereign, the king, said to Nathan, that being David and Nathan the prophet, see now, I am dwelling in a house of cedar, but the ark of God, of Elohim, dwells within curtains. And Nathan said to the sovereign, go do all that is in your heart, for Yahweh is with you. And it came to be that night that the words of Yahweh came to David, saying, go and say, my servant David, thus said Yahweh, would you build a house for me to dwell in? Now we're getting the Davidic covenant, where Yahweh is talking about how he is going to build his house through David forever, right? And so the Messiah comes from the line of David. Okay. O now, Master Yahweh, you are Elohim, your words are true, and you have spoken this goodness to your servant. 29. And now be pleased to bless the house of your servant, to be before you forever. For you, O Master Yahweh, have spoken it, and with your blessing let the house of your servant be blessed forever. And so we have here again the idea 7:6. For I have not dwelt in a house since that time I brought the children of Israel up from Mitzrayim, even to this day, but have moved about in a tent and a dwelling place. So David's going to establish the temple. Okay, let's go to 1 Chronicles 17. Come on, book. 846 in my book. 1 Chronicles 17. Are you there? Okay. This is another retelling of this, okay? 9 through 15 I have in my notes. 17, 9 through 15. And I shall prepare a place for my people Israel, and plant them, and they shall dwell in a place of their own, and move no more, nor shall the sons of wickedness oppress them any more at the first. Since the time that I commanded rulers to be over my people Israel, and have declared all your enemies, and have humbled all your enemies, and I declared to you that Yahweh does build you a house. And it shall be, when your days are filled up to go with your fathers, that I shall raise up your seed after you, who is of your sons, and I shall establish his reign, the Messiah. He does build me a house, and I shall establish his throne forever, Messiah. I am to be his father, Messiah, and he is to be my son, Messiah. And my loving commitment I do not turn away from him, as I took it from him who was before you. And I shall establish him in my house and my reign forever, and let his throne be established forever, Messiah. According to all these words and according to this vision, so did Nathan speak to David, Messiah. Okay. So, the Davidic covenant, the promise of a Messiah through the line of David. Let's go to the Messianic Covenant. Here's where it starts to get tricky. And I want to just fully acknowledge that, okay? In fact, before we leave the Old Testament, please bear with me a moment while I find it. If you go to the last book, 2 Chronicles, right before Matthew, the first book in the New Testament. The last book. Second Chronicles. (23) 36:23. It's like the last words in the Old Testament. Thus said Koresh, sovereign of Persia, Elohim, Yahweh Elohim of the heavens, has given me all the reins of the earth, and he has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Yehuda, Judah. Whoever is among you, all his people, Yahweh, his Elohim, be with him, and let him go up. Yahweh be with him. Remember that. Let's flip over a page into the New Testament. We're going to Hebrews. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So part of also what this book does is it has adjusted the scriptures. It's played with the order of the books in the New Testament a little bit, because they were never bound as an actual book. They were a series of epistles, letters that were written to each other, and then the Gospels. And so the Gospels are still there, first thing in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but then stuff's been moved a little bit, because there's actually not a consensus on what order things should be put in, other than Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, a whole bunch of letters, Revelation. So, Hebrew, where are you at? 1167. Not even close. Okay, so go to Hebrews 8. and we will get the crux of the issue here. Hebrews 8. One of the things, as I've said before, I love about this book is that anything from the Old Testament is in bold. And when it's in bold, I can see, oh, that's where it said it in the Old Testament. And you can very easily see that the New Testament is the Old Testament fulfilled. I mean, a third of everything that's written in the New Testament is direct quotes from the Old Testament, especially when Yeshua is speaking. But you don't get that with your New King James Version or NIV or whatever translation you may have. Where here in the scriptures you can see, dude, that actually, okay, I'm reading it in Hebrews, but that actually comes from the book of Leviticus. Wow. Okay. Which really helps in understanding that Paul, Saul of Tarsus, really knew his Torah and knew his teachings. He didn't condemn Torah at all. He knew what he was talking about. But we'll get to that. We're into covenants. The Messianic Covenant. The covenant of the Messiah. The agreement between us and the Messiah. Here's where most people go. Hebrews 8:8. For finding fault with them, he says, see, the days are coming, says Yahweh, when I shall conclude with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah a renewed covenant. But not according to the covenant, a renewed covenant. Now, yours probably says new. But this book has been restored to the original Hebrew. So I have renewed. But where most people stop is right there. But we're going to go a little bit further. 8:9. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim, because they did not continue in my covenant, and I disregarded them, says Yahweh. Because this is the covenant that and we're going to talk about that too, because that's supersessionism, aka replacement theology. Now, I also want to remind you here, we're not reading the words of Yahweh. We're not reading the words of Yeshua, of Jesus. We're reading the words of maybe Paul. Maybe. And there's a lot of scholarly discourse about who actually wrote the book of Hebrews. And the answer is, if you look into this, nobody really knows. Nobody really has any idea who wrote the book of Hebrews. And it's the newest book in the Bible. It was added about 400 years after Jesus died. And it's pretty obvious that it wasn't written by Paul. But that doesn't fit with the standard lines that we're given in church. That doesn't work with this idea of a new covenant. But we'll continue. Because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days. Now, says Yahweh, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts. What is his law? His Torah. And I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. You're going to get a new covenant. 8:8. See, the days are coming when I will give you a new covenant. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers, you're going to get a new covenant. Roger that. An additional covenant. A renewed covenant. Yeshua himself said, I come not to usurp the law, but to fulfill it. I'm not here to replace the law. I'm going to show you how to do this thing. Okay. And they shall by 8:11, and they shall by no means teach each one of his neighbor and each one of his brothers, saying, Know Yahweh, because they shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, because I shall forgive their unrighteousness and their sins and their lawlessness I shall no longer remember. By saying renewed, he has made the first old. Now what becomes old and growing aged is near disappearing. Okay. The thing to understand here is 8:10. Because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days. The house of Israel. says Yahweh, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts. Giving his laws. He's going to give you a Messiah. Okay? We have that. You're going to get a Messiah. He's like, dude, this house of Israel stuff, man, we've been doing this for a while. We need an intercessor. Okay? And forgive me if I speak on behalf of the Father. We need an intercessor. We've been doing this. The temple's been destroyed. We've wandered in the wilderness. We're trying, but we're not doing great. We need an intercessor. Roger that. You will have one. You will have a Messiah. You will have a covering of blood. We will have a covenant made in blood. You will be atoned for. You will be. I will be. We are atoned for. If we believe on Yeshua's name, we're told this. Okay? Yeah. There is a renewed covenant. I am renewing my covenant. Not after the covenant that we had before, says the Father. But we're renewing this. I am doing this now with this Messiah. And when I give you this Messiah, because of this, 8:10, because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts. And I shall be their Elohim, I shall be their God, and they shall be my people. Who are his people? Those that have his laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts. What is the onus of having this Messiah? What is the implication of having this Messiah? It's right there, 2 verses away from the verse that is constantly used to say, there's a new covenant, brother. You don't need to do that law stuff. It's right there, brother. Read the book. 8:8. Yeah, there's a renewed covenant. 8:9. A new covenant as compared to the people that I got out of Egypt because it wasn't working. 8:10. Because it wasn't working, I will give you this Messiah. And in giving you this Messiah, my laws in their mind, write my laws on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. His people are the people that have his laws in their mind and have them written on his heart. So, that has been used by lots of people to say that now that I have Jesus, I have the law written on my heart. Do you? Can you recite to me the law by heart? Are you living it? What are your fruits, brother? How many times have you heard that in churchianity? As iron sharpens iron, so one brother sharpens another. Iron, at least one piece of iron must be harder than the other in order for one to sharpen the other. And the one that gets sharpened is worn away. You would know this if you were agrarian or worked with these. Are you hard? It is not simply enough for those of us called to this Torah to just have the Messiah. And I say just have. It's not just have, it's everything. We're not justified by our works. We're justified by our faith. But faith without works is dead, right? And these laws are written on our heart. They can't be anything but. It is a bone-deep conviction. I have to do this. Period, the end. I can't make you do it, and I can't make you be convicted, but I have to do this. And for those of us that feel this way, are convicted this way, are pulled this way, we have to do this. And this is meant to be a word of encouragement to you that there is just as much, if not more, justification in the book of Hebrews for you to love the Messiah and keep his commandments as there are for the people that say that because you love the Messiah, you don't have to keep the commandments. So know that you're not crazy, you're good. If you read the book and you don't cherry pick verses and you read the book, you're better than good. Don't worry about anything. He's got you. That is the covenant of the Messiah. Who is the mediator of that covenant? Yeshua is. We can go right here to 8:6. But now he has obtained a more excellent service, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was constituted on better promises. Okay. The Messiah is the mediator of this covenant. He's the mediator. He stands in between us and the Father. He doesn't replace the Father. He is one aspect of the Father. The Elohim, the plurality. Let's go to, while we're here, we'll go to Hebrews 9:15. Hebrews 9:15. And because of this, he is the mediator of a renewed covenant, so that death having taken place for redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, those who are called might receive the promise of everlasting inheritance. Obedience brings blessing. For where a covenant is, it is necessary for the death of the covenanted one to be established. That is purely Greek. What follows there after that is Greek mistranslation. I would again encourage you to read Hebrews and understand Hebrews really well. This book was not written by Paul. This book was put into this Bible after the church had already started to coalesce and form and seek power. Historical fact. All you got to do is just research it and stop taking man's word about your God and start taking God's word about your God, because this book barely fits into the rest of the story here. Barely. But I'll let you do your own research for that. But even then, we can still go to 12:5 and see here. And you have forgotten the appeal which speaks to you as sons. My son, do not despise the discipline of Yahweh, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For whom Yahweh loves, he disciplines and flogs every son whom he receives. Now that's Proverbs 3, Old Testament. And yet here it is in the book of Hebrews, where people are trying to make the argument that you don't need any of that stuff. You don't need that. There's a new covenant. You flip the page and go over here, and it speaks right back to the old covenant, because there is no old covenant and renewed covenant. The covenants stack. Have we figured that out? So, lastly, we have what is called the covenant of peace. So we'll go to, let's go to Matthew 6:12, so we can get our golden rule for the day. Job, Chronicles, Mattiyahu. Man, remember that Mattiyahu guy? My wife just walked up. She's looking at me. The Hasidic Jew who is a hardcore rapper. We need to download some of his stuff and listen to that later. All right, covenant of peace. Mattiyahu. Matt. 6:12. Let's go there, because we're going to be briefly in the Sermon on the Mount anyway. And it's right in the middle of it. I got the Spirit on me. 6:12. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Give us this day our daily bread. Do not lead us into trial, but deliver us from the wicked one. I think I wrote that down wrong. Well, that's not where the golden rule's at, but that's what I have in my notes. But anyway, Matthew 5-7, you have the Sermon on the Mount. What you have in the Sermon on the Mount is Yeshua coming to the people and speaking the words of God as given to Moses to people in person. Now, the reason that Moses had to write this stuff down and act as the intercessor between the people and God, where have we seen this before? Was because the people said, the Hebrews said, we don't want to see the face of God. We don't want to have to deal with him. He's scary. And remember, a lot of the time when God showed up, the glory of the Lord was upon them. People died. He was scary. And so Moses was the go-between. Well, now we have Yeshua here in person, dealing with the people in person, speaking the words of the Father as given to Moshe, speaking them now to people. I mean, right here in 5, blessed are the meek because they shall inherit the earth. Old Testament. You shall not murder. Old Testament. Whoever puts his wife away, let her get a certificate of divorce. Old Testament. Do not commit adultery. Old Testament. You shall not swear falsely, but you shall perform your oaths to Yahweh. Old Testament. Blessed are the meek. We already did that one. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Old Testament. You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. There we go. Old Testament. Okay? So people say that when Jesus, Yeshua, came to fulfill the law, what he was talking about was that he said, you know, when the Pharisees and the Sadducees come against him and they say, Master, Master, mockingly, tell us, what is the greatest commandment? Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And then he says, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And on this hangs all the law and all the Torah. True. That wasn't a new commandment. It's right here in Leviticus 19:18. But there's not a pastor on earth that's going to tell you that. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the kingdom of peace at the moment. Matthew 7:20 through 23. So we'll go there. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the reign of the heavens, but he who is doing the desire of my Father in heavens. Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Okay. What's the law? It's the Torah. We've got Luke 6:17 through 49, the Sermon on the Plain. Yeshua teaches the Torah. He teaches the words of Moses to the people. Okay? I think we've already established that. We get the promise of the reversal of the curses from the previous covenants in the covenant of peace. So we'll go to Revelation 24, chapter 20, verse 4 briefly, and then we're going to jump to Ezekiel. And again, like I said, I don't usually jump around at all, but as I also said, we're literally going on this journey from Genesis 2 to Revelation 20, the entire book, because it's the entire book. Yeshua is in the entire book. You don't get him just in the last third that people have decided to call the New Testament. 24. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them, and the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yeshua, to Jesus, and because of the word of Elohim, those that have a testimony of Jesus Christ and keep the commandments, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands, and they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. The millennial kingdom, 1,000 years, the covenant of peace. Ezekiel 37. Go there, please. As if I can find it in my own Bible. I can't. Where are you, Easy E? Can't even read words. Not Ezra. There we go. 5:28. Ezekiel 37. Man, this Ezekiel guy talks a lot. Sometimes the prophets do that, huh? Ezekiel 37, 26 to 28. And I shall make a covenant of peace with them, an everlasting covenant it is with them. And I shall place them and increase them, and shall place my set apart place in their midst forever. I'll build my tabernacle, my temple among them forever. And my dwelling place shall be over them. Why do we need the tabernacle? I thought Yeshua was the temple. And I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And all the nations shall know that I, Yahweh, am setting Israel apart, when my set apart place is in their midst forever. Okay. Hosea 2:18, chapter 2, verse 18. Where in the world is Hosea? I need to put a ribbon at my table of contents. Where you be at, Hosea 600. Right up the road from Ezekiel. Roger that. Hosea 2:18. Hosea 2:18. And in that day I shall make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the birds of the heaven, and with the creeping creatures of the ground. When bow and sword and battle I break from the earth, and I shall make them lie down in safety. There will be peace, the covenant of peace. And I shall take you as a bride unto me forever, and take you as a bride unto me in righteousness. What is righteousness? Doing what God tells you to do, how he tells you to do it, when he tells you to do it. Noah was found righteous, and Noah did all that God commanded him, and he was found righteous. I love that line from Genesis. And Noah did all that God commanded him. Take you as a bride unto me in righteousness and in right ruling, and in loving commitment and compassion. And I shall take you as a bride unto me in trustworthiness, and you shall know Yahweh. All right. Lastly, Isaiah 54. Where did you go, book? 4:14. Isaiah 54. Isaiah was another one of those long-winded fellas. He had a lot to say. Isaiah 54:10. For though the mountains be removed and the hills be shaken, my loving commitment is not removed from you, nor is my covenant of peace shaken, and Yahweh has compassion on you. What is the covenant of peace? It is prophesied in the end times. It relates to the millennial kingdom. Okay, those are the 7 covenants. We have 6. We're waiting on the 7th. But they all stack. To this day, you can see a rainbow in the sky and be reminded of the covenant between Yahweh and Noah. He has not killed off the entire planet with a flood since that day, has he? No. To this day, we are still encouraged to be fruitful and multiply in the Old Testament and the New, and the Father still has absolute control and dominion over our fertility and virility as established in the Adamic Covenant and reinforced in the Abrahamic Covenant. You realize the Abrahamic Covenant is all about fertility. It's why we're not allowed to worship false gods and pagan deities, in large part because that all revolves around fertility. You like Easter? You like going to church on Easter? Go Google Ishtar, I-S-H-T-A-R, fertility. And the Father says, no, that's mine. You don't do that. We still have the Mosaic Covenant. It's still here. We still have the law. We're told through the Davidic Covenant, the prophecy of the Messiah coming, that when the Messiah gets here, as outlined in Hebrews, we're told that the Mosaic Covenant still stands because that law is now to be written on our hearts as part of what we do to keep our half of the agreement. And then finally, we have the kingdom of God, the covenant of peace, which is yet to come, the millennial reign of Yeshua on earth, the millennial kingdom. Those are the covenants of God. And now we'll pause again.